The August 5th meeting of the City of West Sacramento Planning Commission to order. Prior to the meeting, we celebrated one of our staff member who had been with us for nearly 5 years. We celebrated her service with us. And I'd like to start, as we always do, with the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to ask Commissioner Moore, who celebrated his birthday yesterday, to lead us in the pledge.
Vicious. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. And we start with presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of the commission. We do not have any requests to speak on this item. So we'll move, and just a reminder for folks who do want to speak on other items that come before us, there are some slips at the entryway in here. If you'd like to speak, please submit those before the end of the staff report on those particular items to the clerk, and the clerk will deliver those to me. We ask folks to keep their comments to about 3 minutes. We actually do have a timer to help you with that. And of course, we ask for respectful discourse in the chambers. I'd like to move on to correspondence and staff communications from the city planner. Mr. Ricola?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the Planning Commission, you have 3 items of correspondence before you tonight. First of all, a memo from David Tilley on the OPDE solar conditional use permit. You also were delivered just prior to the meeting, a petition by a group of residents in relationship to item number 2. And then last, you have a memo on agenda item number 3, which is the liquor barn conditional use permit. There was a city council meeting conducted today, but there were no items of discussion on major items for the Planning Commission. Our next regularly scheduled meeting is scheduled for Thursday, August 19th, and you should have a notice before you that indicates the items that have been scheduled for that meeting. So with that brief report, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Ricola. Next, we'll move to disclosure of ex parte communications. Any commissioners have had conversations or correspondence, communications with any of the applicants or residents? Yes, Mr. Liebig?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I need to disclose that I've had talks both before and following the last workshop or hearing with the applicants real estate broker for item number 3.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Liebig. Mr. Moore?
Thank you. I've also had conversation with the applicant on number 3 and a couple of citizens.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. All right.
Madam Chairman,
Mr.
I
Martini?
had a conversation prior to the last meeting where we heard item number 2. I haven't had any conversations with Mr. Bream, the applicant, since that meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Morzini. All right, that brings us to our consent agenda. We have one item on the agenda. Is there a motion to approve? It's the minutes. I know we've changed our processes, so this is new, somewhat new for us.
So moved.
Thank you,
Second.
Mr. Ledesma, seconded by Mr. Moore. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes unanimously. We'll move on to our regular agenda, which is a continued public hearing on the proposed OPDE U.S. Corps conditional use permit number 10-3. For folks who are joining us for the first time, I'd like to review our process here for hearings. We typically start with a staff report. Then we hear from the applicant. We then hear from the public for comments, and we don't engage typically during that period of time in a back and forth, but we are listening to all the comments. And then we bring it to the commission for questions for some of our comments, and that's a bit more in a kind of a discourse manner. And then we close the public hearing, and that's when we deliberate and make a decision. I'd like, though, to ask if there are any clarifications for that process from staff, council.
Good evening, Chair Sandine, members of the Planning Commission. I just wanted to remind the Commission and the members of our audience here today that we have a number of conditional use permits on our agenda, and the Planning Commission's jurisdiction in deciding approval or disapproval of the CUPs are to be made within the confines of the 7 findings for a conditional use permit. In other words, the Planning Commission should not withhold approval of the CUP unless the project cannot meet one or more of the findings.
And that would be the same for a denial as well? I mean, it's a similar kind of
Yes, that's
advice.
correct.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you very much.
thank you.
All right, so we'll move to the staff presentation. Mr. Tilley.
Yes. Good evening, Chair Cindy and members of the Planning Commission. As you stated, the public hearing on the OPD conditional use permit project has been continued to tonight from your July 15th meeting. The commission ultimately decided to continue the item after several topics were raised both by the commission and by members of the community at the previous public hearing. Those issues generally circled around views of the proposed solar arrays, which again will be benefiting anyone new in the audience, would be located on the west side of the Deepwater Ship Channel, south of Marshall Road, and further down the channel into the county's unincorporated area. Views of the trackers from both residences in Bridgeway Lakes and also from the potential future trail along the East Levee where issues were raised. And also there was considerable discussion about at that time, the proposed overhead power lines, which are now actually proposed to be undergrounded, and the applicant will address that in more detail during their presentation. In response to the issues raised at the last meeting and then subsequently at a neighborhood meeting, the applicant has made some adjustments to the project and provided some additional detail, and many of those exhibits have been attached to your staff report tonight, including showing the tracker angle and some additional view analysis for the project. The applicant tonight during his presentation will expand on those topics. I have provided a memo to you this evening regarding the project and more specifically addressing the issue that was raised previously related to Swainson hawk foraging habitat. Just yesterday, as a matter of fact, we did receive comments from the Department of Fish and Game regarding this particular topic, and I've attached their letter to your staff report tonight. We also received additional analysis from two additional biologists regarding the project site and as it pertains to Swainson hawk habitat and how the project would relate to that. The project biologist is here this evening, and he will address those topics and more specifically. However, we have included a condition for Swainson hawk mitigation in anticipation of what we were going to get from Department of Fish and Game. However, tonight we are recommending that the language be modified as presented in the memo to make that condition a little more consistent with past practice. But the intent is the same, that mitigation has been required by Fish and Game, and that the project will be conditioned to provide that mitigation. Also this week, since the staff report was published on Monday evening, the applicant hosted a neighborhood meeting regarding the project out in Bridgeway Lakes Park. Approximately 20 persons attended that meeting along with city and port staff, discussed the project in some more detail, and many persons were able to go and look at the site post that was posted at the project site, which would help to inform not only where the project is located, but the relative elevations and grades from the Bridgeway Lakes side and on the levee and then actual project site itself. There's a 5-colored post that's out there, and it's still out there at least as of this morning, that shows, is it located where in the first site where the trackers will be located, but the different color bands represent 4-foot increments to help you gauge from a distance what the relative grade and height is for where the trackers would be. We also want to discuss how the project fits into the port's really green objectives, and really the port and the city council since 2005 have pursued strategies and actions to become more financially and environmentally sustainable, in particular to attract businesses to the port that are involved in the green industry. There have been several actions that have been taken related to air quality and using best available control technologies for port tenants. We also have a council has a green and sustainable community strategy, and also the port mandates implementation of green port strategies at its operations. And the port is included in our carbon footprint report for its operations. And the port has even installed its own solar array project on the roofs of the buildings out there that provide power to current port operations. Ports also required that Sierra Northern Railroad, which services the port, has upgraded its rail operations to help reduce emissions. And of course, the port will has received considerable money in grants to form kind of the marine highway, if you will, that will be trying to have more goods brought through the port up the ship channel rather than being trucked from the Bay Area as they are typically. So tonight also, as part of your staff report and related to the project's environmental document, we have included a few errata sheets which were intended to clarify some of the discussion in the document and to help solidify that document. We do recommend certification of the environmental document tonight, and we do recommend approval of the project based on our analysis that all the relevant findings can be made. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions from the commission before we hear from the applicant? Seeing none, we'll ask the applicant to come forward for any presentation background.
Good evening, Commission members. I'm Greg Brem with OPD US Corporation. After the last public meeting, can you bring up the slide, PowerPoint, please? After the last public meeting, the next day we went out and erected a site post on the site, which is graduated 4-foot sections on the site to delineate the actual kind of a tangible measure of the actual visibility of the erections on the site, the projects itself. That was up over the weekend. That following weekend, I went and met with some of the residents in the local community, took some photographs from their rear windows of the residences to see the visibility of that site post from the residences. And we discussed the actual visibility of the trackers from that site as well. We talked to them about some of the mitigation measures we were proposing. We'll go over in a little bit more detail on the PowerPoint a little bit later. We then went ahead and responded to the residents who responded to the petition that was provided last planning meeting, responding to each of those points that they brought up, discussed those in the letter and invited them to the public meeting on the 2nd of August, actually. Again, we had about 20 to 25 members of the community there. We also engaged with the Friends of the Swainston Hawk and actually took them to the site to visit both the site and also an installed solar array in Yolo County for some of their feedback and also to actually see what the project will look like, a similar project would look like on the ground. The results of that meeting was that they did agree with us that the actual site where the project is proposed is probably marginal habitat at best, but they still would probably require mitigation from us. We then also engaged two of the top Swainston's hawk biologists in the area to visit both the site and also the Yolo County solar array as well. They also agreed that the actual site is probably not the best habitat for the Swainston's hawk, and they provided several recommendations which we concurred with that would provide us the ability to actively manage the site to improve the habitat value for those species. We have revised plans with regarding the visibility of the overhead power lines. We have revised the plans. We're in the middle of doing revised detailed drawings. We have spoken to PG&E about the status of their interconnection application. They've informed us that they will take the full 45 days to give us an answer on the systems impact study. That is probably expected around the 27th of August. We don't expect any issues with the undergrounding of the power lines. There is a couple narrow sections around the channel where we did discuss before where we were concerned, and we wanted to make sure that those were addressed fully. There are some options beside actual overhead power lines that we will discuss with the engineers and with PG&E once we get their feedback on the system impact study. We also did discuss mitigation options with the Yolo JPA on mitigations for site impacts. We're still discussing those options and working with Fish and Game to engage them on further discussions on that. We did decide to reduce the site elevations of at least site 1 and 2 to a 1 foot lower. This should make the trackers virtually invisible to the residents in their second-story windows of their homes. The trackers would still be visible from the actual top of the eastern levee, but it's about 6 to 8 feet of the arrays will actually be above the existing grade that's on the far side. The rest of those will be below an existing berm that's now presently delineates the retention cell there. And again, Just really quickly, we are actively looking to actively manage the site for habitat. We are, as our tracker arrays are designed specifically to leave open spaces between them. That's one of the advantages that we have on the market, is to leave open space and leave habitat accessible for the species. So we are actively engaged in trying to make that happen on the site. Just going to walk through the PowerPoint here real quickly. Again, this project will create about 350 jobs in the local community. Where we come from in Spain, the Spanish state of Navarra is actually currently getting about 70% of its power from wind and renewable resources. So we are hopefully transferring that experience over here to the U.S. market. We are mitigating for, our mitigations we're taking consideration, or special considerations were made for species that exist on the site or are expected to exist. They include the giant garter snake, black-crowned night heron, blue heron, burrowing owl, the Swainson's hawk, and some other raptor species, northwestern pond-turtle, and white-tailed kite. So all these, when we actually laid out the sites, we did, before we submitted this conditional use permit application, we delineated the sites based on where these habitat areas existed and to avoid those in the actual site plan itself. So that again, on our the points that were brought up in the last meeting that we wanted to address after the commission meeting on the 15th were the power lines and PG&E interconnection, the visibility of the structures from the residents on the far side of the levee, the Swainson's hawk and other habitat issues, toxicity of contents of the proposed equipment, conflicting information on the OPD website and on the project description, and restroom facilities on site, and the fencing and security issues. And again, we did mail out 265 letters to residents addressing each of these concerns, and we had a chance to talk to them on the meeting on the 2nd. So the power lines, again, we've decided to underground the power lines to the greatest extent that we can. We don't expect any conflicts with the Army Corps of Engineers, but they will have the final say on where we can and cannot underground. Also, again, with PG&E, we are kind of at their mercy with this 45-day term built in their tariff. That's when we'll get the answer from them. So we can't provide any direct feedback on the cost of the system or any other impacts that they would have. So on site visibility, we did talk to the owners. Again, the site post, I'll kind of walk you through the site post scenario. The site post is on a 30.7 foot elevation on the far side of the levee. On the picture here, you'll see that there's the upper picture is the normal view from the window, and then the lower vision is the actual zoomed in version of that same picture. You can barely see the site post with the red and yellow sections above it, right above the horizon. So that's showing that the total height of that is 24 feet above the proposed pad height, the pad elevation of 26 feet. So you're basically seeing the top 8 feet of that 24-foot post from the residence and windows. So in other words, the 16 feet below that point would not be visible. So when we lowered the pad height to 26 feet, that 16 feet is roughly the top of the tracker. So it'll be right at that horizon line. The main reason we're not proposing to go much lower than that is because of the base flood elevation is 27 feet in the area, and we need to maintain a little bit of freeboard in case there are issues over there. We might be able to squeeze a little bit more, a few inches perhaps, but that's pretty much the lowest that we could go and still maintain minimum flood prevention elevations over there. A little more description on the site post itself. There was some confusion on the website with our trackers are being designed to go to a 45-degree maximum tilt, in which case they would be about 17 feet in height. This 45 degrees is for the Spanish market. Being at a higher northern latitude, they require a higher tilt angle in the wintertime to capture as much sun as possible. Here in California, we're at 38 degrees in Sacramento, so 38 degrees would be the maximum tilt angle of the trackers here. That would be in the winter months. The winter months, technically on the tariff for the utility, is actually about 9 months of the year, but we could propose to extend that higher, or reduce that higher tilt angle to only 4 to 6 months to minimize the visibility for a bigger part of the year. So at that 38 degrees, it's about 16.38 feet. And at the summer angle, it would be 13.55 feet during the summer period then, when when people are most likely to use that, the trail on the eastern levee and most likely to be outdoors. The trackers will be below the visual horizon from the homeowners. They still will be likely visible from folks on the trail itself. The site post is located, it's a little hard to see here. It's about halfway down, approximately halfway down Site 1. It is roughly in line with the closest row of trackers that will be closest to the residences. So it's a pretty fair visualization of where the trackers will exist on the site. And again, the base elevation of that is at 30.7 feet, about 4 feet higher than the proposed site elevation. This is a revised photo simulation of the same site. This actually includes the site post on this group of trees. It's fairly hard to see in this picture. The next one is a zoomed-in version of the same site post with the trackers. The site post is roughly here. You can see, again, the yellow and the red sections are visible. Everything from the bottom of the yellow section down, again, that's about 16 feet above the proposed pad height. So about 6 to 8 feet of the trackers would be visible on top of the levee. But again, from the residences, they would very likely not be visible from the homes. And for discussions on the Swainson's hawk and the biology, I'd like to bring up our biologist, Bruce Barnett. He's going to talk to you about some of the mitigations that we're talking about and some of the impacts that we discussed with the Friends of the Swainson Hawk biologist and the Friends of Swainson Hawk directly. Bruce?
Hey, thank you. My name is Bruce Barnett. I'm a biologist. I've been a biologist in this area for about 30 years, 31 years. It's my vocation and passion, so I know a lot about the species and the habitats. Now, we, in evaluating this project, wanted to see what impacts could be caused by the project, how these impacts could be avoided and or mitigated should they be unavoidable. Specifically for the Swainson's hawk, we noted that, and you'll have a letter, I believe you have a letter from the two top experts on Swainson's hawk in the state, Jim Estep and Dick Anderson, who agree with us in that the current value of the habitat out there is low to moderate or marginal, in the sense that the vegetation is unmanaged, it's very high, it consists mostly of thistles and pepperweed, and in its current state does not offer the advantages to the Swainson's hawk that very close by habitat in the bypass, such as alfalfa fields, would offer them. So we wanted to take this opportunity for them, number one, to look at the site, tell us what they thought the habitat was like and what opportunities we could have for managing the habitat in such a way within the tracker arrays and between tracker arrays that could incrementally to geometrically increase the value of habitat for these species. And they gave us some very, very good recommendations, including planting perennial grasses, keeping them very short, in between the arrays themselves, or in between the array sites themselves and within the arrays themselves, allowing some tall grass refugia around the trackers themselves so the rodents, the food for the hawks, could go and escape them and multiply. And also providing little perches coming out from about 20% of the arrays of the trackers so that the hawks, Swainson's hawks don't use perches as much as other hawks do, but it would provide perches. We did see a Swainson's hawk on the top of a tree when we were out there this last week, but it would provide other hawks and the Swainson's perches for hunting. So it would improve exponentially the value of the habitat on site for the hawks, and probably encourage them to use the habitat now, where they, or in the future, where they do not use the habitat, or had not used the habitat currently and in the past. Coincidentally, this same habitat improvements provide opportunity for burrowing owls. We noted 2 burrowing owls on site in the entire project area, but by maintaining short grass, specifically perennial grass, we could improve that habitat exponentially for the owls as well. So the great thing here, these are the great projects, that they become truly green in the sense that we have opportunity, we have means to improve the habitat where the hawks currently exist, not shuttle them off to some unknown farm. We know I've personally seen quite a few nests between I-80 and the mouth of Poudre Creek. This is where the hawks hunt. We can improve their habitat and make it better for them. And we think we have an incredible opportunity here to make this project truly green. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you have some regarding.
Get a couple quick more slides to give you a little more visualization. Some of the larger maps of the arrays don't really address, it's hard to visualize the space between them. The actual space between the trackers, the actual physical structures is about 50 feet from tracker to tracker. Just counting the foundations, if you look at the top of the array, if the arrays were laid flat, it would be about 30 to 35 feet between each of the arrays. So this should be plenty of space, according to the biologist, to accommodate the hawk's needs. And again, overhead view of the same site. So then beyond the habitat issues, the other questions that we had were the toxicity of the proposed components. We did discuss this with the homeowners and informed them that these panels are silicon, crystalline silicon panels. They are not a thin film panel. Some thin film panels these days have heavy metals as part of their components that make up the panel. These crystalline panels are basically highly refined sand. Silicon is one of the second most common element on the planet, very benign. On the conflicting information, again, we addressed this with the height, the 45 degrees, maximum height of 17 feet. Did conflict with our description of the project. We expect our project height maximum to be about 16.3 feet. And again, with the revised site elevation that we're proposing, that should be just at, if not below, the sight line for second-story residences. The photos that we did take were from one of the highest pad elevations on the Bridgeway Lakes subdivision area. So we're quite confident that all the other homes will have a less visible, less clear vision of the arrays from their pads. A couple of the last things that that were brought up at the last meeting, we'd like to address also, the restroom facilities being available for employees on site. It's always been an understanding that we would be subject to the OSHA requirements to provide sanitation facilities for our employees. Under the recommendations of the city staff, we probably are going to have a portable system that will be towed behind the vehicles so that they will be locally available to the workers on the site and then be taken off the site at night so we won't have any issues with vandalism. Also on fencing and security, we are fairly agnostic as far as fencing or no fencing. Each of our projects has a very extensive camera network and infrared sensors. Anytime someone tries to tamper with arrays, we get notifications either by email or telephone calls. Basically, the trackers call us and tell us there's a problem. The photo sensors and the infrared sensors can tell whether we can tune it to small animals, people, whatever we want. We will generally know and have very high-resolution photos of anybody that's within the park at any time. It's our understanding that the city police department would still like to have some sort of fence, a 3 or 4 strand livestock sort of fence. That should not be very visible. Again, that'll be at 3 or 4 feet tall. That will be below the height of the actual berm that remains on the site. So again, our arrays will be set back behind that berm, and then the fence line would be below that, so that should not be visible at all for the residents. There should not be any issues with anything collecting on that fence either. So again, lastly, we just kind of recap all the issues. We have decided to underground the power lines to the greatest extent we possibly can. We don't expect any issues where we cannot underground. And if we do, we have a few alternate proposals that we'll discuss with PG&E and the Army Corps of Engineers to try to make sure that we at least keep those lines at grade or underground. The structural visibility, we believe that we have minimized it to the greatest extent possible without compromising the flood level elevations. There is maybe an opportunity to reduce a few more inches, and we'll continue to do that before we actually set the grading plan. We plan to take a prototype tracker onto the site, and again, we'll engage the local residents and try to demonstrate to them the visibility before we actually set the final height elevation, so they'll be very comfortable with what we're moving forward with. Swainson's hawk and the other endangered species, we are prepared and fully plan to mitigate any requirements that we do are received from Fish and Game and through the JPA. Toxicity contents of the panels, there are none that we're aware of. We did explain all the discrepancies between the website and our project description. Happy to entertain, if there's still questions, I'm happy to entertain those questions. Yes, the restroom facilities and the OSHA compliance and the fencing and security, I believe we're in compliance with the city's requirements on that. So with that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to respond.
Thank you. Before I ask for questions, I just want to remind folks when we hear from the applicant, that opens the public hearing formally. We do have 3 requests from the public to speak, And I also have a question for staff or process, staff or council. If someone has questions about the project but does not wish to speak, would those go to staff? I just had a set of questions brought up to me, so I don't, this is a new one for me, and I don't have the process down on that. Thanks, Mr. Chili, or council.
Normally, the staff responds to questions that the commissioners raise. However, if the commission directs staff to answer specific questions, at that point, staff can answer those questions that have been raised by members of the public.
Even if it's not in public testimony, if it's just written and handed to us?
That's correct.
Okay.
It's within the purview
All right.
of what the commission would like to do.
Okay, it's just a new one for us. Okay, thank you for that clarity. Before I ask the members of the public to come and speak, are there any clarifying questions that need to be asked before we hear from the public or the commission?
Chair,
Yes,
do we have,
Mr. Ledesma?
do we have an opportunity to ask questions later? or-
Right.
Okay.
Of course, of course.
Okay,
We're,
that's-
so typically, again, we hear from the staff.
Yeah.
We've opened the public hearing, hear from the applicant, and then we ask to hear from the members of the public. Then we ask questions, I close the public hearing, and then we deliberate.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So no questions at this time, thank you. So we have 3 requests to speak. First is Mr. Matt Rose, followed by Lan Ho, or Lon Ho, I apologize.
Hi, good evening. It's good to see you guys again, Madam Commissioner and Commissioners. One thing I would like to really say is that we're very pleased with the way that Greg Brim and the OPDE staff has gotten more involved with us. They've really gone above and beyond to listen to our concerns. So that's certainly something we're very pleased with. One of the things that we were very happy with is that they're lowering the pad elevation to 26 feet. But one thing I'd like to clarify is that there is a little bit of wiggle room there. And the pad elevation that we sit on and the homes to the north of us sit on will still be able to see the tops of the trackers, although it certainly is not what it was going to be. Given that there is a little bit of wiggle room here, there's really, according to, I think it's the second page of the, or the first page of the agenda, says that there's going to be 4.5 inches visible at the top from our homes. If there is a little bit of wiggle room there, we'd certainly ask that the wiggle be made so that those 4.5 inches aren't seen. If we've come this far, it'd be great if we could just seal a deal and have these not be visible at all from our homes. One of the other things that we were interested in advising certainly the commission on is that the summer tilt, which is the lower tilt angle, is actually going to be only 4 months of the year. The winter tilt is going to be 8 months of the year. So if these are visible, they're going to be visible for the vast majority of the year at the higher tilt. And that's certainly something that we're doing everything we can to preserve the aesthetic value of the views that we have, and certainly the values of our homes. If you're able to see out and look at structures from the back of the homes, that certainly will decrease the value of the home based on the aesthetic value of what's right behind us. The other thing, too, that we're talking with Greg about is the possibility of taking even a microzone inside of Zone 1 and changing the maximum tilt angle on just those trackers, so that if there was a 1 to 2 degree decrease in the tilt angle during the winter months, that would also decrease the visibility of the trackers in the case that the pad elevation cannot be further adjusted. So that was certainly something that we'd like to be more involved with as the process goes on. As far as the undergrounding of the lines, we're still wanting to be involved with that. If Corps of Engineers says that it's not possible to underground lines, we'd certainly like to be involved in knowing what other options there are so that they remain not visible from our homes. And certainly, again, all of this information that we're sharing with you, and certainly our perspective that we're sharing with you, is really just to preserve the value of the aesthetics of the experience that we have coming home every night and getting to see the sunset and the coastal mountains. Certainly we paid for that, and when we move from these homes and look to sell these homes, we don't want to take a loss because of a project that's now visible from our rear view windows. So we really appreciate all of your insight, and we appreciate the effort that OPDE has made. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Lon Ho?
Good evening. My name is Lan Ho, and I work for Manpower Professional. I'm a finance and accounting recruiter, and I have my partner, Hilda Garcia, who's an engineering recruiter. We have been partnering up with OPDE since last year and assisting them with the accounting department and the engineering department. And looks like this, new project will be bringing in a lot of growth for OPDE. So a lot of our unemployed candidates, will be, hopefully there's, with this project, it will open up a lot of doors for our unemployed candidates that we have. So it has been great working with OPDE, and our candidates are very happy that they're working there. So please let me know if you have any other questions.
Thank you. Thank you. And finally, Jim. Thank you, Paschal.
Good evening. My name is Jim Paschal. I'm an attorney. Not paid, but working anyway for Friends of the Swenson Hawk. Yes, I did go out on a tour with the project proponent, a very good tour for which we're quite grateful, of the site, along with the president, who is not of our organization, who's not here. I don't know that anybody said the habitat was marginal, but regardless, my own view is I would have called it low to moderate, which happens to be what the biologists Anderson and Estep said as well. We were told by the applicant that the project site is normally grazed by the port, cows and sheep in late spring to reduce the vegetation level, which actually does increase Swenson hawk foraging value because it reduces the height of the vegetation. I was also told by the applicant this year that the grazing occurred, the grazing animals were taken off, and then there were some late rains, and of course the vegetation took off, which is what was out there. I would presume under normal conditions it would have looked better than what we saw. I would say, having driven around Yolo County a little bit, it looks just like any other vacant field that hasn't been cultivated this year. We also, interestingly, saw quite a few trees out there, large cottonwood trees, and it would be great if more could be planted out there, which is recommended by Jim Estep. We also saw several hawks sitting on the trees out there. It was hard to tell species because they looked like they were immatures, looked a little fuzzy. At least one was a Swenson hawk. We saw another one fly over, and a red tail. And from that, I would presume that the area is used by hawks. But regardless, we support certainly the recommendation by California Fish and Game, which, by the way, recommends coordination with the Yolo County Habitat Conservation Plan, Natural Community Conservation Plan, JPA, a long word, I didn't think of it, which you may recall the various municipalities of the Yolo County, including the city of Sacramento, West Sacramento agreed to use the JPA agreement for their mitigation for Swenson hawk. And the JPA agreement calls for 1-to-1 across the board, whether it's low quality, high quality. That's the recommendation of California Department of Fish and Game. As far as staff recommendation goes, with regard to paragraph 6, which talks about applicants shall mitigate for impact for Swenson hawk foraging habitat to the satisfaction of CDFG, I would just add satisfaction of Cal Department of Fish and Game and the Yolo Habitat JPA, which is what Fish and Game is calling for anyway. And then I would suggest attaching to the staff conditions a copy of this August 4 letter as appended. And in the condition 6, say the recommendation of Department of Fish and Game is attached here too in this letter of August 4, 2010, so that everybody knows exactly what's going to be happening and a key letter recommendation doesn't somehow get lost in the shuffle.
Thank you.
With regard to the...
I think if you could wrap it up, actually.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And then finally, the comment from Pat Schuyler, who would like us to address a couple of questions and has a comment. Will West Sac benefit from this other increased tax revenue? What actually will be on the east side of the channel? And she also expresses that she doesn't think folks have heard about this issue generally. Every person I've asked their opinion hasn't heard about anything about it. So those are the three public comments and the written comment as well. So I'd like to bring it to the commission before I close the public hearing to make sure folks have all their questions answered and if there's any information needed. Mr. Ledesma, no? Okay. Mr. Morzini? Any questions before I close the public hearing? All right, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for deliberation. Mr. Ledesma.
I'll start just a couple of the last question you read first, but first, thanks to staff and the applicant. First, for the applicant for working with the community. It's nice to hear that they went out. I was glad to see the pictures from the second-story window, which is a vantage point that I didn't get from the last meeting, and so it certainly helped us understand where you were. So I just want to thank the applicant for going out of your way to make sure that you heard their viewpoint, and thanks to the public for being open to it and providing initial feedback today. I know it's hard to speak up here. I'm having a problem myself tonight, but I appreciate it. And so a couple of questions. First of all, on noticing, because the question that came in was around noticing. I mean, I was out there today with staff just to get a viewpoint from my own eyes. But we did notice the adjoining neighborhood, specifically in the Bridgeway Lakes area, correct?
Yeah, we expanded the normal noticing ring to 1,000 feet, and we picked up about 300 properties in that list. And so those were mailed out prior to our original public hearing, which of course was continued until this evening.
Okay.
And in addition, the applicant also mailed out to that same list for the community meeting that they held on Monday of this week.
So a couple of meeting notices went out. I noticed it was on the front page of the News Ledger, so plenty of, I mean, I want to make sure that folks have plenty of opportunity to weigh in on this. David, on a couple of points, first that I've been concerned about, which was, again, thanks for the photo simulation and the yardstick, whatever we're calling that, the post to visualize where they're going to be. I mean, it was pretty obvious that there's going to be a visual impact from the top of the levee, and my own eyes saw that today. But I appreciate you trying to really lower it down for the second-story windows, because technically the levee isn't a trail yet. So, I was trying to keep that in mind all afternoon today and pondering this. But the wiggle room, I mean, I was just going back to one of the comments that Mr. Rose brought up, which is that it probably could go down a few more inches. But it was my understanding that given where it is, they shouldn't be able to see anything. Is that?
Yeah, certainly, based on the tilt angle and focusing on the winter where the trackers are at their maximum angle, and looking at the sight post, basically the views start at about 16 feet on that sight post, and the top of the tracker itself is, maximum height is about 16.4 feet, so maybe 16 feet 3 inches or so. So it's certainly conceivable from those angles and from those homes, which are about a quarter mile away, that if at least the top, say, be conservative, 6 inches of the trackers could possibly be visible from those lines. But and then wintertime, in the summertime, when the trackers go down to the lower angle, they're certainly below the sight line.
Right. I'm going to come back to the summer months because in a second. So, I guess I'll make the formal ask if there is wiggle room to go down. I'm not sure if it doesn't sound like, but inches. I think we should try to squeeze as much as we can out of it. Also, on the letter that I looked at today, dated July 22nd, that was on the memo, this one, from ODP, OPDE, excuse me. It proposes a number of options that out of, the commission had the concern, I think Commissioner Liebig brought it up, ways to mitigate, but there's some options here. Are those still things we should be considering?
I apologize, I don't have the document in front of me that you're referring
But it's a letter dated July 22nd, and OPTE has proposed 3 options to address project aesthetics from the second-story windows of residents. Does everybody have this? I'm sorry. Am I the only one that got this?
I guess that must be in the PowerPoint. One issue about, speaking about the elevation and grades here, I think it's one important point to help inform the discussion, is that the flood protection over there is the primary driving force in terms of, what elevation can the trackers be put at. Looking long-term, in addition, where we may be going with FEMA in the future, these are areas where, the tracker areas where the dredge material has gone from past port channel deepening. But also building above the flood elevation is also important because that's part of the capacity of the overall channel. And it does then also, by building up, that provides for protection of that equipment as well. So we want to make sure that as much as we are trying to minimize the views and bring the trackers down, they brought them down, a whole foot since our last discussion. But we need to be mindful of the flood elevations that we need to respect.
Right, and I totally understand that, and I'm not in any way trying to compromise the flood protection necessary, but I think part of what we were trying to think about was mitigating aesthetics around the tracker. And I know that anytime we build over or think about planting anything on those levees or the berm that's in front of it, we have to go through a few agencies to get there, Army Corps or the Bureau of Reclamation. So there was just some thought, I think, at some point about planting native grasses and whatever else. And are those options at all anymore that we can explore, or are we even on the eastern side, I think?
Yeah, well, what's important to note about the eastern side is that's all privately owned. So neither the city, the port, or the applicant has control over that area. There's about 5 property owners that own that. So anything we'd be talking about would need to be on the west side of the channel, near where the arrays will be located.
Okay. There was some talk about kind of the tracker during the months, the seasons that they'll be up and down based on tilt. So did I hear the applicant correctly that they're willing to consider the winter months being at 4 to 6 months, which would then?
Yeah, the winter season in this case with the way the sun goes is longer than I think what we traditionally consider to be winter. Would ask the applicant to clarify which months, but as I recall, it's roughly October to April, if that's what's considered winter in this context.
I'm sorry, October
to April.
To April?
Yes, is what winter is in this sense.
I mean, can we specify which months, or is it totally on their control? I mean, I'm just trying to understand what our process is. I mean, or what our latitude is. Can we say that we want it at summer month level through October and only from November on? I mean, I'm just asking the question.
I would ask that you allow the applicant to respond to whether or not if you're envisioning a condition along those lines would be acceptable.
I'd like to ask that we hold the set of
That's
questions
fine.
like that. If we have a set, then I'll open the public hearing again, and we'll have a set of answers go, because I would prefer not to have
That's
back and
fine.
forth, if that's okay. So let's hold on that, thank you.
I think I'll stop there, and
Okay.
others will do it. Thank you.
I didn't mean to sound so stern, but I'm trying to keep
No, that's
this
fine,
little
good.
process going. Mr. Liebig.
Okay, thank you. I first would like to thank staff, the applicant, and the community for all of their efforts working together on this and for pulling together those figures, especially the photographs of the line of sight. And then for the applicant for making project modifications to actually lower the trackers to a point where they come, that they can be seen for a few months out of the year, and we're looking at about 4 inches. One thing that Commissioner Ledesma brought up was a concern about the site of the project from the eastern levee. This was something that I brought up on the last meeting. I also had a concern about this, being that it's a proposed recreation trail. I'm not considering it an impact, a visual impact. I also appreciated the new photos or the photo simulations of the site from the trail. I found those helpful. Because I'm not considering it an impact, I'm also not proposing a condition for that. But I would encourage Mr. Lukin and the port to include an interpretive program for the project in your land use agreements that the port will be doing at sites to be determined upon, I guess, the determination of where the rec trail is going to be. So we're talking about something that's far out. I don't wish to make it a condition, but I do think it will be helpful to have interpretive plaques out there, kiosks, something to explain what are we looking at when we're up on the rec trail. And I think it could be included into the, rec program, but this should be something that should be worked out between the applicant and the port, I believe. So I'm not sure if that would adequately address Mr. Ledesma's concerns on that one. I have a couple other comments, if I can grab them. The 3-wire fence, just to be blunt, I'm perfectly fine with that. I am happy that you're going high-tech. I don't really want to see all kinds of fencing out there. I'm okay with the fishing games. Leaving the condition with fishing game. They are the resource agency in charge of this, and it should be their determination what exactly needs to be mitigated. And just to be also, just to give my opinion anyway, I understand that the trackers will still be visible. I'm not sure I would agree that 4 inches a quarter mile away is an impact, or would even be noticeable at that point. So I think we've moved beyond impact on that. I wouldn't want to change the ability of the project to produce power, so I'm not really willing to consider altering the tilt. I would probably pursue looking at the base elevation before altering the tilt, unless it does help you with power production. But the project will be funded by producing power, and if we reduce that, then they have to rerun the numbers as well. And I believe the community is going to benefit from the production of power. So here, I don't really want to limit that at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Liebig. Mr. Moore?
I'd also like to thank the applicant. Pictures do wonders for me because now I can almost understand what you're doing out there, and I think it's helpful to everyone. The thing Chris was talking about down there about the height, and if we have a little bit of wiggle room, at least for the portion that goes from Marshall Road to our city limits, I would like to see if there's something we might be able to do for that little portion down there. And I mean, if it'll help eliminate anything, that might help a little bit. I guess I have 2 questions, David, and I'm not quite sure how these go. When I was listening to the applicant talk, they were talking that they were going to underground all the stuff along the thing if they could, maybe, but they might not be able to because the Corps may not allow that.
Well, it's ultimately, the whole project needs approval from the Corps and also the Central Valley Flood Protection Board. And so at this point in time, we wanted to be clear, although we certainly believe the Corps will allow that. You know, that is not a decision they have made thus far. and nor can we get such a decision until such time as the city acts on the project as the lead agency, and then those responsible agencies will act subsequent to that.
What happens if the Corps says no?
Well, there are some other options available. The applicant.
Well, I heard the applicant say that, but of course, we have no idea what all those options might be.
Well, there's another manner where essentially those can be placed in a hard concrete case that would be on ground level. And so rather than being on poles, and they would be more or less, that would be more or less on the surface, but still buried somewhat because they need cover. So there are a couple of options before you would have to go back to having, any overhead, options. But we're confident that the undergrounding would be approved.
If it has to go back to overhead, would it come back for any reason?
Well, the project.
Isn't this a little more extreme than a zoning administrator action to say, yeah, instead of underground, you can overhead?
Well, as the project has been conditioned thus far, right now we've set it up where that they are to be undergrounded subject to approval of the Corps. We would probably.
I'm just asking what happens past that. I just
Well,
don't
we would
understand the process.
we would go to another option before going back to poles at that point, but still keeping them at least at ground level, if not buried.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me. I'm not opposed to that. I was just asking what happened. I guess my next question that I just don't understand a little bit is we received the letter that you gave us today from Fish and Game. They're kind of talking that there is a Swenson Hawk, and I guess we all agree there are Swenson Hawks out there. And is the applicant trying to mitigate with what they were talking about tonight, mitigate the problem so that we don't worry about the Swenson Hawk and pay the fee?
Well, it's really kind of a two-part thing there. They are committing to doing mitigation in consultation with the Habitat JPA and Fish and Game. But however, also by the very nature of the project, they may also enhance the existing habitat value that's out there by virtue of stabilizing that property and providing the purchase that the trackers would provide. So it's really a double edge, if you will, so that this is
Well,
also.
I thought that was a great idea.
Yeah.
But Fish and Game hasn't decided officially then?
Well, they have provided us this comment letter, which of course we received yesterday, and this is a relatively standard, comment letter we receive on Fish and Game as it pertains to Swenson Hawk. There will need to be further discussions with both the Habitat JPA and Fish and Game about the nuances of the project and how these potential benefits that have been identified both by the project biologists and the additional two biologists could factor into that equation and the level of mitigation that's ultimately necessary. So we are asking tonight for that mitigation and the specifics of that to be determined in consultation with the JPA and the Fish and Game, and that's why we've recommended that change to that condition.
But we left off, did we leave off the YOLO Habitat JPA off the condition?
In the memo I've provided to you in the italics, about halfway down the page, the Yolo County Regional Habitat Management Program is in there. That is the
Oh, that's the JPA?
That's the
I'm sorry.
JPA, so.
So the city, the JPA, and Fish and Game will come back to the applicant and say, yes, you mitigated enough, or you have to participate.
Well, yeah, and then to what degree what is necessary, that has to be sorted out later,
Okay.
but mitigation will occur.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Marzini?
Thank you. I also would like to thank staff and the applicant and the public for especially the public for their participation. And I'm happy to see a lot of what the public has talked about has been incorporated in the recommendation from staff, but there's still a couple things, and I'm not going to be redundant and talk about some of the things that I agree with that have already been stated. But the utilities, once again, that condition 6, I understand Commissioner Moore's apprehension, but it does indicate that unless prohibited by the Corps of Engineers or the Flood Protection Board. And I like your first option, David, regarding what people in the utility industry would probably call an at-grade placement of those facilities. And maybe somehow in that condition 6, we might be able to list that as our first option if it's impossible to bury them. But naturally, the most cost-effective way would be to dig a trench and put those circuits in conduit. But at grade is something that's acceptable in the industry, and I don't think something like that would harm the integrity of that ground, and that appears to be what the concern would be.
Mr. Morzine, I believe you're discussing condition number 5. Just for,
Is it
just
5?
for, yeah, just for
Okay, I'm
clarity.
sorry,
6
5.
is about the Swanson's Hawk foraging
sorry.
habitat. Thank you.
Condition number 5, thank you. And then the fencing, I think that's appropriate since there are going to be cattle and sheep grazing. I know cattle for sure, they love to rub against things that are stationary, and there's plenty of that there. Also, in attachment 9, there is reference, in fact, I think Mr. Bennett referred to, the pages aren't numbered, but it'd be the 3rd page, Mr. Barnett. There are actually 4 recommendations there, and I think you cited 3 of them at least. One of them had planting occasional solitary oaks or other appropriate trees, and I'm hoping maybe we might be able to pair those kind of additions to the screening approach that we might take. And I know everybody recognizes that flood protection is the #1 priority of the bypass. However, if this area is above the floodplain, and it seems appropriate to have vegetation for the foraging hawks and that sort of thing, that we might be able to use some sort of native plants to help screen in that area in the wintertime that might be exposed to the extent practical. And I wouldn't want to put a stipulation, but it appears, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, David, that these 4 recommendations are going to be a part of that plan?
It certainly can be. I think this would be part of the discussion with Fish and Game and the Habitat JPA as to if these type of methodologies would be of benefit, but would still be okay with flood protection wise. And also we want to make sure that any plantings out there won't ultimately result in shading of the trackers themselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then the next one would be on finding number 5. It talks about access, adequate utilities, access roads, and that sort of thing. And it appears as though the applicant here is probably going to be the primary user of that access road. And it seems if it's not already included in the contract or the lease agreement that the port has with the applicant, that maintenance participation for that road should be included in that agreement, because there's going to be wear and tear on that road, and it looks like the applicant is going to be provided through their maintenance, probably be the prime cause of the need for maintenance. And so it only stands to reason that they participate in that. And just a comment regarding access, I see the applicant has addressed the sanitary as far as the workers there. And I would certainly hope that the opportunity for the students in the region to participate in learning from this facility wouldn't be precluded because there weren't sanitary facilities. And I would think that we'd want the applicant to be able to show the public, especially students, what is occurring there, and how the city of West Sacramento is participating in the renewable energy commitment that we have in this state and in our country. So we wouldn't want to miss that opportunity because we don't have a place for the kids to go to the bathroom. And then lastly, there was a comment, I think it was in the written form, regarding addressing the potential property value impact that this project may have in the residents that are on the east side of the levee, and I'd like maybe some sort of comment regarding whether or not this is something that would, in the city's view, would be like a disclosure statement requirement, or just how this works, because it seems like every project that we see in the community, whether this commission sees it or not, has some sort of impact on neighbors, whether it's financial impact on property values or aesthetic impact or something like that. And I think the question deserves an answer, and I'd want to make sure that we get a comment from staff regarding that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tilley, would you like to respond at this time to that?
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you.
I want to talk about regarding fencing. It seems to be a desire of the commission to have that, so we will need to add a condition along those lines. So I do have something written up, and if we're ready to get close to a motion, we'll have that for the commission's consideration. And regarding impacts, as you know, the environmental document concludes that all the impacts that there would be with mitigation or otherwise would be less than significant. And so we are asking the commission to certify that document tonight and make those findings pursuant to CEQA, including the errata sheets, and then also approve the mitigation monitoring report.
Thank you. Mr. Govan.
Yeah, just a couple things. David, so that means there's no disclosure required?
We do not have a current disclosure requirement in the city's municipal code for this type of project. We do have one, for example, for farming, but we do not have any others of that nature.
Yeah, I'll make this short, as the commissioners have touched upon just about everything. I was glad to hear that the residents were satisfied that the applicant is working with them and will continue to work with them to mitigate any issues that they may have. I do want to say that I do support what Commissioner Ledesma and Commissioner Moore stated, and I think all the commissioners feel is that if we have a few inches of wiggle room, I don't want to look back, a few years from now and say, if we'd only taken it down an inch or two and we had that opportunity. So I hope that the staff will work with them to take it to that lowest possible threshold without causing any concerns with levee issues. Did I hear the applicant say that they had a portable, yes, to take out, and so, not porta potty, but a portable array, so that the residents could see sort of what it's going to look like when it's in. That would have been helpful to kind of look at prior to today. I did go out and look at the site. It is quite a distance away, and it looks to be. It's hard to see from the top there, but it will be visible. So that would have been helpful to see prior to the meeting today. And I am not against looking at the feasibility of lowering the tilt if that's possible within the project. So I would encourage you to continue to explore that if it's an option without affecting the output.
Thank you, Mr. Govan. I, too, am appreciative of the work that the applicant has done with the neighbors, has had the dialogue and has listened and met, and that the staff also has gone out to try to see from the visual perspective impacts. I'm compelled by the staff report and the required findings and analysis in regard to the conditional use permit. But it sounds to me that there are just a couple of issues, so I'd like some staff guidance. It sounded to me that I heard three. One was with regard to, and this is where you can advise me about whether or not we should open the public hearing just to hear from the applicant one last time. But I heard something regarding whether or not there was a possibility. So I actually am not hearing that much dispute with regard to the required findings. So that moves us to having a discussion about conditions. And so the three items are the tilt season. Like, is there any leeway there? I also heard Mr. Morazzini ask. He requested for, if possible, a condition clarification for the at grade. For example, if it's prohibited by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers or Central Valley Flood Protection Board to underground, he was requesting, I believe, that if that's not possible, that the city would like to see at grade language or at grade power line laying, however the language is. And then finally, fencing, a condition regarding fencing of some kind, I heard that. So before, and road maintenance. So if staff, if those are the items, could you guide us in terms of having a discussion with the applicant regarding
Madam
those?
Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Moore?
not to interrupt you, but.
Oh, no,
could
no,
we-
thank you.
Could we talk about, at least in the area that is in our city limits, if there is so-called wiggle room, whether those could go down?
That's what, I actually had that in there.
Oh,
I
I'm
maybe was using different language. I said tilt and seasons, which was related to,
Well, the
was related to
tilt's
those, yeah.
one issue, and the actual placement of it is a second issue, I think, but maybe the applicant may be the only one to tell us that.
So just to recap, I'm completely
Okay.
satisfied with the findings and analysis, but some of the commissioners have questions on these particular items. So if you could help guide us through that dialogue and move us forward in terms of asking the right questions of the applicant, modifying any conditions that don't go against the findings in your staff, and the staff report, that we can move us forward, that would be helpful. Thanks, Mr.
Yes,
Tilley.
I believe I can help you with all of those. However, regarding the angle, I would request some input from the applicant on that specifically. Regarding the grade, we have condition number 1 that references the 26-foot elevation. It does permit it to go lower if permitted by the Corps. And so I think that certainly it's been raised many times. We are talking about a couple inches here. We can't emphasize enough, however, the importance of the base flood elevation in that area. And so they certainly could go lower if permitted by the Corps. If the commission wants to provide that direction to the applicant, to have them go as low as possible while still maintaining compliance with the base flood elevation, I think that message has been provided this evening. Regarding the overhead or undergrounding of utilities, I would propose in a condition number 5, where it's at the first comma where it says shall be placed underground, I would consider introducing the phrase or at grade into that condition so that all the options are considered. Fencing, we do have a draft language which I could read to you now, which would say that, building permit plan shall include a fencing plan consisting of a 4-strand barbed wire design, subject to approval of the Community Development Department. That type of fence is consistent with the ones that are out there around some of the mitigation areas that are already out there. And then regarding road maintenance, I may seek some help from our port colleagues regarding that, as it may pertain to the eventual lease with OPD, between OPD and the port.
Mr. Lucan, would you like to address that, or? Thank you.
You know why he's coming up, though, David, on that one condition? The undergrounding of the utility lines?
Yes.
And you said unless it's prohibited, then they could go, shouldn't it be at the end? They should be undergrounded, and if they're not permitted, then they can be put at grade.
Yeah, I think that's where we were trying to go.
Okay.
That
I was
would
just
be
trying to
what
make
I
sure we
would
got it
recommend
at
also.
the end, not in the middle of it.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense. I'm sorry, Mike.
Thank you,
No
Mr.
problem.
Lucan.
Mike Lucan, Port Manager. Yes, actually, it's a very common feature of all of our lease agreements that any disturbance that is done to any of the port's properties resulting from a project's construction, that they have to repair to the roads to their original condition. So I would think that would be a condition, or not a condition, but a facet of this lease as well. So.
And they'll need to maintain, because they said they're going to be there every day.
Yes, we would work out a maintenance strategy. There is a maintenance component that the Army Corps of Engineers performs. So it's in fact, just this past year, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, in coordination with the Reclamation District, placed quite a bit of rock material on there. So it's a little more complicated because of they maintain that project levy, so it's a combination of the port and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and now OPDE. So, but we can certainly include and will include in our lease agreement language that clearly covers both repair due to construction and maintenance.
And that's not in we do not deal with the lease agreement. We deal with the conditional use permit part of this? Just for clarity, for our own clarity as a commission.
Port Commission
Yes.
would
Okay.
have the lease under their.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lucan. All right, Mr. Tilley, would you be able to guide our discussion with the applicant with regard to some of the conversation we'll be having in the commission? I'll at this moment, I'll reopen the public hearing for that purpose.
Specifically
you.
regarding the
Thank you.
tilt angle.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like we still have some questions pending, so.
Well, I think, I mean, I'll speak for myself. The only question, just to get clarification, because I heard it in the opening statement, was around the 4 to 6 month window and the winter time. And I would just like to know, we said, and then it came to October to, what did we said, April. But anyway, I just want clear, just kind of what we're looking at, just by way of that. And that was my only issue.
Thank you.
Question, I should say.
Regarding the seasonality, the tariff specifically has a summer rate. The summer rate for the tariff is May through September. So the balance of the year is at a different rate structure.
Okay.
There's no reason that we would have to maintain that lower angle or to change the lower angle until, say, November, December. So we could keep that lower angle for the majority of the year without much significant impact in revenues. That's not a problem.
And with regard to the conditions that we're discussing, there's no
No
concern
problem.
or issues? Okay.
And for clarification on we do not yet have the portable tracker. We have a prototype that we will have on a trailer mount for display and static displays once that is available. And again, we don't have access to the site. There's very difficult terrain out there right now, so we couldn't get it to a place where it would actually be a meaningful place. But once that is available, then we will take that on site and get the public feedback before we set that final elevation. We will continue to work to get as low as we can.
Looks like, I
Madam
think Mr.
Chairman, may I ask
Morzini wants to ask a
Yeah, I want
question.
to
I
ask
can
one
see him
more.
at my
I want to make
peripheral
sure
vision.
you're being very cooperative, and I think we're all grateful for that with the community and everybody. But I want to make sure with this tracking, the seasonal aspect of it, you list this as a $145 million project. So to me, it's critically important that we don't compromise the efficiency of this array that you're going to be installing. Is anything we're suggesting going to compromise that?
The winter time period of the tariff, which I believe is November, December, January, February, those are the only months that we would really want to maximize that tilt angle. The
Okay.
rest of the year, we're pretty indifferent.
Okay, so you'd be willing to show that flexibility?
Yes, absolutely.
Any final questions before I close the reopened public hearing? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much. Close the reopened public hearing. I'll bring it back to the commission for final deliberation, actions.
If I may, Madam Chair,
Mr.
I
Ledesma?
just wanted to clarify, because I did say something, and I understand staff clarification on the impacts are proven. I'm agreeing with the findings generally in supportive of the project. And I will say that, thank you for the clarification, understanding. Generally, we've done all we can to mitigate the aesthetics. I do want to recognize Commissioner Liebig's very astute observation or suggestion that we do find ways to maximize the educational opportunities from the array. And I think my observation from today is being out in the levee and looking westward is generally one that this is a really fantastic opportunity for the community to lead in green energy. And I'm 100% supportive of that. And what I saw today was that what our residents are showing concern of, which is a viewscape that is probably rare in our community, in our region, just looking westward with very few man-made objects in the foreground, background, or anywhere. And so there was a bit of me that was worried about that today, and I'm sure it's landing on our residents with some trepidation. But I think, it's an opportunity for us to learn and teach generations to come about the step we're taking, because we are literally putting something that is forward-thinking in our purview. And from a land use perspective, from the conditional use permit, I think I asked staff earlier today about this is an agricultural land, and so generally speaking, agricultural land, has quite a lot of latitude with some other part of the city. This one just happens to be in a very viewscape-rich area, so I'm sensitive to that, to be frank. But I'm supportive of the project. I appreciate the steps you took to our residents, first of all, and to show, to illustrate to us that, that the impacts to our residents on that side are minimal. Again, I think that the ask from the residents is not a very outrageous one to say, hey, if there's more room to wiggle, then let's wiggle. And I think I'm fine with the condition as it's written in terms of if it's permitted by U.S. Corps. So I'm sure you'll find a way. The message has been drawn pretty starkly that that's a way we'd like you to go. So with that and my support, I'd like to make a motion on this with the, you have to remind me what the added conditions were.
So if you were to make a motion, you would, I think, be accepting the staff's recommendation regarding the change in condition number 6.
Correct.
I think you'd be asking for at-grade language added to condition number 5, and then a fencing condition with language Mr. Tilley's may read to us. The road, as we heard, was in the ground, was in the lease, and that's not within
Yes.
our purview. So I think
But-
those are the 3 items, and you could, I think we want to hear from Mr. Tilley, then you could probably complete your motion. No, I said that. That's who he's reading out, that fencing.
Yeah, I could reread
Fishing
the-
game, Swainson Hawk, do we have to actually include that one? No, okay.
You've already got it.
Yeah, that's, you already addressed.
And that's actually on number 6. That's what I
Yeah,
said. The
that's number
condition
6,
number
it's
is from
revised.
staff.
Yeah.
Right, so number 6 is edited, is
Yes.
revised by staff. So Mr. Tilley, the fencing.
Yeah, fencing on building permit plans shall include a fencing plan consisting of a 4-strand barbed wire design, subject to approval of the Community Development Department.
Thank you, Mr. Tilley.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Ledesma, is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Liebig. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you for the community for being here. Congratulations, applicant. Thank you for staff.
If I could, Madam
Mr.
Chair, I'd just
Ricola?
like to read
Yes?
the appeal
Oh, yes, thank you.
procedure.
Please read the appeal process, Mr.
Any
Ricola.
interested party may appeal the decision of the Planning Commission on this matter but to the City Council by filing a written appeal with the City Clerk within 15 days of tonight's action. The appeal must be accompanied by the appropriate filing fee, and in the case of an appeal, the applicant will be required to fund all costs relating to staff work on funding the appeal.
Thank you, Mr. Ricola. We'll move on to item number 3, which is a continued public hearing on the proposed liquor barn conditional use permit number 10-5. And again, this is the continued public hearing, so we'll use the same format that we've just described in terms of staff, applicant, hearing from members of the public. We have a number of requests to speak. I'll ask the commission if there are any items that you need clarification on. Close the public hearing, then we'll deliberate. Any other guidance from staff or council? That's the plan. We're following that plan for the hearing. Okay, thank you. Mr. Tilley?
Yes, as Chair Ksenian, as you mentioned, this is another continued public hearing from our last meeting. This is regarding the proposed liquor barn project that will be located just down the street here at the corner of West Capitol and Jefferson, where the former Blockbuster Video project store was located. Liquor barn would be occupy that entire space and sell all forms of alcohol and other related items. However, tonight's conditional use permit is solely for the sale of hard alcohol. Beer and wine is not part of this discussion tonight. There was discussion of this project at your last meeting, and ultimately there was a vote taken, and that vote resulted in a 3-3 vote, which means that no decision was made. So the commission ultimately decided to continue that in hopes of having a full commission at tonight's meeting and be able to hopefully have a decision either way. As was the last meeting, staff is not recommending approval of this project this evening based on the inability to make some of the required findings. And also tonight, you received a memo from us. We did receive a few petitions signed by some residents, each petition expressing opposition to the proposed project. So tonight, staff's recommendation is to deny the conditional use permit request. At this time, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Tilley. I think it's time, we'll hear from the applicant, please. Thank you.
Thank you again for the opportunity. Now, do I have to could look at that 3 minutes clock again? Okay, because last time all I kept looking at because it was running out. Okay, we came here, explained ourselves. I was going to make a really nice presentation, but you know, what can you do for a liquor store? So what I want to start with today is, first of all, I want to tell you about a little bit myself. I'm not trying to impress you with my credentials, but just want to impress upon you that how we came about this thing. You know.
Do you mind stating your name for our records? Thank
I'm
you.
so
I know who. Yeah,
so sorry
I have
about
your
that.
request to speak. So.
Yeah, my name is Indrajit Grewal, and
Thank
I'm here
you.
for Liquor Barn. And again, just to continue, where I've been in this retail business for about 14 years now, and before that, and even during that, I was a CEO of Alto Networks, and I've got masters in finance. So the reason I want to say that, you know, I'm not a typical store owner that, you know, raise some money, and this is not a job for me, it's a business. I have taken 3 companies public, and our focus is to take Liquor Barn public as well. And that's the reason the stores that we create in a very strategic locations, and we run it as a business. We don't run it like a mom and pop shop and have all my families work there and live there. So we don't do that. And we create a very extensive business plan. We have our pro forma P&L statements, our break-even analysis, our balance sheet, everything is there. So it is created as a business plan like all other large businesses that you see. And I know Commissioner Marzani asked last time that what was the value add to the society. First of all, you know, as we come there, we probably would be end up spending about $1 million into the society, or into this community. We are looking at adding about 10 jobs. And if I look at my P&L that was created by our CFO, we are probably going to insert about $300,000 of sales tax revenue, about $100,000 in payroll revenue. And the building that we are trying to create here this is a showcase for us, because this is how we show that this, you know, as we are going public to our investors and so forth, it's going to be a beautiful building. We're going to redo the whole thing. We're going to put awnings. We're going to put extra lighting, and when I drive up here, I see the work you guys have done, and we're going to complement that, not come there and have something just a sore eye. And that's something that we're planning to bring in, and we do a very extensive training with our employees. Our employees know all our products, they know all the wines, they know all the ABC regulations, the police regulations. We have zero tolerance policies. You know, in last 20 years, we have not got any citation from ABC. Matter of fact, if you guys probably have it in your package, the letter that our district supervisor, ABC, wrote about us. And I also encouraged Lieutenant Sockman to contact the local police department and gave him the name of Captain Scott. And he, I think from after last time's meeting, was talking to Lieutenant Sockman, and he says, if I had an opportunity to go up again, and if they would ask me a question, I would have certainly answered that he did a very extensive background on us, on me, and on our business. And he says he has found that we have an impeccable record. He's talked to the police department there, and in all these years we've been in that place, we have zero incident in our place. We don't tolerate it. We don't tolerate transient. We don't tolerate people just hanging around there. It's a business, and that's what we treat it like. We have a security that walks around to make sure that you'll have people asking to go buy for them. We don't allow that. We're very strict about all that stuff. And we work very close to with local police, with the MAD program and ABC. As a matter of fact, our local district attorney use us as an example for all other when they give their classes. You know, there's a lot of paper from us that they take just to show other business owners that how a proper business needs to be operated. And a couple other things I want to see. So, yeah, and it was also mentioned in, Lieutenant Sockman mentioned the last meeting here that there's no liquor licenses available. Absolutely, they're not. So we are going to go buy someone's. So a person that's not doing enough business, we're going to say, okay, we're going to give you so much money to shut your business and give us your license. And that takes care of the saturation problem. And one thing I want to say, when the name liquor comes, everybody just hair rises. It's like a taboo. To me, it's a business. It's like any other business. There are problems in a business. There are not problems. And in the last 14, 15 years I've been running this place, we have experienced every single problem that a liquor store would. And we have standard operating procedures written, we have work instructions written, and we have overcome every problems, and we know how to deal with them, and we deal. And so to me, it's another business, it's another way for our revenue. If you don't mind, I'm going to drink some water. I'm not feeling that well today. Sorry. As you can see, I'm pretty passionate about this business. And for a commission to be telling a liquor, just like me, or a liquor store that comes here and sets an example for all other liquor stores to follow, is sometimes it's kind of troublesome, because when we come in, we set an example, we set the bar high. This is what the liquor store should look like, this is how the liquor store should operate. And what it has happened in a couple communities that we have been, okay, either the other liquor store owners have to reach to that bar because we take their business, or they're out of the business, and we take it out, and the problem is gone. So now because I came here and I spent almost 2 days trying to talk to people and trying to see, they all know, the liquor store owners know, the mom and pop shops, that, okay, you know what, no other store is not going to be allowed. Why should we operate in a better, higher standards? Because we're sitting like fat cats, nothing's going to happen, nobody else is going to come, no challenge is going to come, so, it's a status quo. So I asked the commission that it's about time that you guys bring someone in here that will set standards, how a liquor store should be operating. And that's what I asked today. And I saw the article in the newspaper about we don't need a liquor. That's such a naive and tactics. I used that when I first started, because a business cannot oppose another business to come in with ABC. So we had used that. We used to write a letter to the editors, have all my family members, friends write a petition that, oh gosh, don't allow that. But later on, I think we grew out of that. So again, what I'm here to say to you today, with a lot of passion, is that we will come to this community, treat this community like ours, become a part of the community, put a store out there that you guys, everyone in this community is going to be proud of. We will take away the problem that is there right now. Because right now, the problem with transient, problem with people buying and getting drunk and laying out there, that's our problem, and we will take care of that. We will light that place up. And from the last meeting here, we heard from the landlords that the other people that are inquiring is like 7-Eleven or discount store or dollar store. I think I'm a better option. And I promise you that I'm going to run this place like I've run all other places. I'm very passionate about it. I have zero tolerance for people messing up. And if given the opportunity, you guys will be proud that you made this decision. I'd be happy with that. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 4 requests from the public to speak before I move to that. And again, we're in a continued public hearing format. Are there any questions from the commission at this time? All right, seeing none, we have a request from John Seiden. Sorry, I want to get your name right, so if you can come up and tell us your name, so make sure I pronounced it correctly.
John Seiden.
John Seiden, welcome, thank you.
Resident of West Sacramento. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And I'm pretty much in support of your staff report and its recommendation. I have read, and tonight I've heard from the applicant, and I'm very impressed with his promises and his commitment to create a well-managed and attractive business. And I admit that maybe that use would be better than seeing that store sit vacant for a year or 3 years or In the case of Purity Market across the street, used to be 20 years. However, with two other locations, two other outlets on the same property selling liquor, and with 7 within a 1 mile radius, it really is unnecessary. I don't see how that particular location calls for a liquor barn. There are other locations in the city that would probably serve the business just as well and would not encounter the same kinds of resistance that that particular location would. That's a prime location. West Capitol Avenue and Jefferson Avenue for years has been seen as the center of West Sacramento. And city actions to date have reinforced that with the City Hall and the community college building, the community center, the library, and all of the efforts that have been made to upgrade West Capitol Avenue. So it's a good location, and a liquor store is not the highest and best use in that location. I'm impressed with the owner's commitments, as I said. However, I know that businesses can change hands. Liquor Barn was formerly owned by somebody else, and it could be owned by somebody else in the future who would not share the same kind of commitment and desire for first-class business as the applicant is. So along with those who have submitted petitions to you, and I submitted some more tonight with names of local residents on it, I would urge you to follow your staff's recommendation and deny the conditional use permit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seiden. We also have a request from Brian Turner. No? Okay, thank you, Mr. Turner. Jay Richter.
Good evening. I'm Jay Richter. I'm the broker for Liquor Barn. And I'm just going to go through your list here, if you don't mind. I gave you guys history on me last couple weeks ago. I am from Reading. I'm familiar with Liquor Barn. And it's a very frequented place by my family, friends, their families. And it's a respectable establishment and not really held in regards of a liquor store. Excuse me. So starting at item number 2, where it says the requested use is essential or desirable. I think my response to that is that there really is not any other store quite like it in West Sacramento that specializes on a large scale on beer, wine, and liquor. So that to me means that it could be desirable. And then as far as variety and quantity available, that could be essential because you're not going to find that variety anywhere else in the city. Moving on, where it talks about the approximate distances from other stores that also sell these products, I want to just state that Rite Aid, which is 400 feet, that's a pharmacy or drugstore. That's their primary business. Safeway, 500 feet, that's a supermarket where the primary business is food. Raley's, same thing, that's a supermarket. Poplar Food and Liquor, which is 0.42 miles away. I can't confirm this because I don't recall, but I remember talking to Lieutenant Sockman, and he confirmed that Poplar Food and Liquor tried to get a liquor permit recently, and I think they were denied. So they don't have liquor, but they call themselves Poplar Food and Liquor. They're primarily a gas station. That's what's right out in front. The next closest actual liquor store, which is about 1,000 square feet, mind you, the location that we're looking at is about 6,700 square feet, is Marino's at Jefferson. It's 0.57 miles away. And the next one is Ketton Low Cost Liquors at Sacramento Avenue at 0.59 miles away. That's also probably about 1,000 square feet. And then A&B Liquor, which is also about 1,000 square feet, and these are generous numbers, located about 0.8 miles away. and then Country West Liquor, which is probably about 3,000 square feet, 1.34 miles away. If you take all one, let's see, Marinos, Ketton, you got about 6,000 square feet. We're still 700 square feet bigger. We've got to fill that store with something. We're clearly going to be specializing. We're not going to just put Budweiser in there. It wouldn't make any sense for us to go to a location because everywhere else has got that product. So with regard to number 2, that's all I'll say on that. Number 3, the requested use will not impair the integrity or character of the neighborhood nor be detrimental to the
If
public
you could
health.
wrap up, Mr. Richter, too. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I'll try to be quick. I don't think it's logical for the staff to believe that an additional venue that sells liquor will attract additional safety issues or vagrants or homeless to the area. I just think that we're not going to be catering to that clientele for the discriminating bum that needs his particular cheap beer and liquor. And then our business model and products is going to cause the remaining liquor stores to have to raise the bar because they're going to have to step up if they're going to want to stay competitive and be in business, in my opinion.
Thank you, Mr.
So,
Richter.
On your recommendation, I'll stop.
And finally, we have a request from Matt Horton to speak.
Good evening. My name is Matthew Horton, and I'm a resident of Southport, live behind Nugget with my wife. And I grew up in Reading, spent 25 years of my life there, and I remember going to Liquor Barn since I was a kid, and it was always a safe place. My father took me there. And when I turned 21, I could actually buy alcohol. You know, I would go there, and it's not one time that I remember that I didn't get an ID. Even though you got to know the folks there, they always checked the ID. That was always one of the big things they did. I remember them not selling to people who were inebriated at the time. I would always refer to it, I guess you'd say it's like a beverage and more of Reading. Reading's a small community. Everybody knows it, and I have still a lot of friends up there. 3 of them are police officers, and they patronize it all the time. It's not that they sell alcohol, but they sell some food, but they will sell higher-end wines, which may draw a better crowd, and a more elite crowd. You know, I intend on having a family here in West Sacramento here in the next few years, and you know, I have no worries about a Liquor Barn going into that location. I think it's a great location. I think it'd be good for the community, and I do believe it's as safe as anything else. I really do. You know, the police will be aware. The owner is obviously proactive on what he does, identification, and the ability to not sell to people who don't need anything else to drink that night. So I would be comfortable with my family down the road. If you're walking downtown, which eventually we're going to with the amount of money we're putting in here, be safe, and they will keep it very closely monitored. And I think the police will be very involved at first until they have their checks in place to where they feel this is a very comfortable operation. And yeah, I was in Reading about 4 months ago, and I actually went in there, and it's still the same as I remember it. So, you know, Southport's a great community. West Sacramento is. Never thought I'd live here, and I'll never leave here. And I am completely comfortable with it. And I think it will be good for the community, and we'll bring in tax revenues, jobs, and be nice to have a high-class liquor store too. Not that I drink a lot, but if we want to go buy some wine, there you go. So that's about all I've got to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, those were the requests to speak from the public. If there are no, are there questions from the commission before I close the public hearing related to facts, background, questions of the applicant? All right, I see shaking heads, so I will go ahead and close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission for deliberation. Mr. Liebig.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, applicant. Most of my questions are actually directly for the staff. I'm going to start with finding 4. I'm struggling with this one. And for me, generally, well, I want to, could you please expand on finding 4, which is about the general plan, and how your conclusion was drawn on finding 4?
Yes, this particular land use policy, it's in our general plan and pertains specifically to commercial projects. So we don't see it as much because many commercial projects, don't come in through any discretionary review. But it does say that the city shall seek to ensure that new commercial projects, I'm paraphrasing, would reflect the city's concern for achieving and maintaining high-quality development. And so, as many of the policies in the general plan, I mean, that is fairly broad. But in this case, talking about, achieving and maintaining high-quality development, we looked at this project in a sense that it certainly, although it may provide, some degree of, specialty, products, it does provide many products that are available in numerous other locations throughout the city, and as evidenced in this staff report, many just within a mile or less. And also at the site, thus far, no improvements have been proposed, to the building or to the site in terms of upgrades to any of the building exterior or the parking lot, landscaping, any of those features. And in weighing this, and given the tremendous amount of progress that has been made in the, say, between the Jefferson and Merkley segment of West Capitol with City Hall, the new Community College Center, the library, the streetscape project, et cetera, that in our estimation in this area, those are examples of the high-quality development that this policy seeks. And so with respect to this particular project, in this context, and with the context of where it's going and what's surrounding it, in our view, the project does not represent the high-quality development that this goal says the city shall seek and achieve.
I'd like to elaborate a little bit on that, because I think David's hit most of the points. But, in addition, it's a use that's been identified by the other findings that is known to have secondary impacts of transients, in the area that are attracted, to these uses, certain higher arrests. But in addition, the city has made a major commitment over the last couple of years in locating the Los Rios Community College and other facilities which are primarily youth-oriented, and having, such uses available as a liquor store in that area, even though there are other uses that are selling liquor in the area, is really not committing to a higher quality development. So that, I think, is just to elaborate a little bit more as to why it's inconsistent. Commissioner Liebig.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of comments. Whether or not I like this location for this, I do think this is a good project, and I would like to see this type of a business move to the area. I know we're probably going to be discussing whether or not this is the right space for them. But this brought up a couple of points with me that probably the last time I spoke, maybe my frustrations didn't quite come out. The existing businesses appear to be having effects in our community, and I'm not sure if we're addressing those. There are, actually, I would like to request the staff look at their existing permits to make sure that they're in compliance. Lieutenant Stockman brought up several issues with the current conditions surrounding the existing sales of alcohol. I'm not sure if the police are tracking these calls. Could staff actually?
And council, could you give us some direction? Because I know we have a matter in front of us for the conditional use permit itself. And so related questions, should they be brought up now or in our informal discussion which follows this? I just need some clarity about process for Mr. Liebig and for me as chair.
I'm sorry, you mean in terms of asking questions?
About directing staff to follow up on other alcohol permits in the city of West Sacramento and the vicinity.
That's really at the discretion of the commission, and you can either direct staff to do that now or wait at the conclusion
Okay.
of all of the
But I
remarks?
tie it back to this project.
Yeah, thank you. That's what I was losing you a little bit there, so thank you.
I don't see this project as resulting in increased crime. I have concerns with the current situation, and it's unfortunate that I think it will be the current situation that will drive the decision of this project. I still do understand the density concerns. Pardon me, I'm flipping through notes. I still find it as a desirable use. It would be a store that I would go to. I think it does come down to compatibility, not probably adjacent to Safeway or the fact that there's another grocery store or a Rite Aid, but the college campus is probably a good concern. Next to that is another school and a library. Those are concerns that I do have, and the pedestrian traffic. And so I'm still probably in disagreement with finding 2. I find that it's desirable. It's just probably not the right location. The city police department, which is finding 3, which is why I keep bringing it back to this. I do have a problem, well, no, I do see issues here. I'm not sure that it's with this project. So I'm not sure if staff can, this won't come back to us. The decision will be made tonight, but in future hearings, this might be something that would be pertinent. And then the final one was general plan. So I can see conflicts on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Liebig. Other comments?
I have some.
Mr. Morzini?
I'll go next. And I want to thank the applicant for his presentation. And I mentioned last time, 2 weeks ago when we heard this, that I'd gotten online and looked for liquor barns. And obviously I found the Reading one. And there were some in Oklahoma City or Nashville, Tennessee or somewhere. But And I want to apologize to the applicant because in the last meeting, I spoke about value added, and that could be like a buzzword or something. But what I really meant by that is there are, as staff report indicated, 6 or 7 nearby venues for purchasing liquor. And what I was looking for is, okay, if somebody wants to buy alcohol, and in the presentation, you indicated you're much larger than the other places that sell liquor, so you have plenty of stock, you have probably a better variety. But as far as the value added, I was looking for, besides maybe a bigger variety, but what else are you selling, like gourmet foods or other things that are unique and desirable and needed in the community? And there wasn't anything identified. And I guess that's what's concerning me, because I think that I would agree with Commissioner Liebig that condition 4, I think by what you described to do to that corner building, which is, I remember when it was Kenny Shoes, and gosh, how old does that make me? Makes me real old. And so that building's been there a long time, but so is Safeway Shopping Center, and so is the Rayleigh Shopping Center. And across the street where Walgreens is, although the Purity store was tore down years ago, before you were born, Ms. Sandine, that most of those facilities or stores are rebuilt. And there's nothing to preclude this store from being a gym in West Capitol Avenue. So I disagree with finding 4. However, that's really not the issue right now, because there are other findings. And I guess I do agree with staff regarding condition 2, that it's not desirable because I don't see that value added that's coming with the store besides a larger selection and more of it. And for that reason, I really have to defer to the police department and staff's recommendation. I think it's not going to provide that opportunity to provide the community with something that's really beneficial that's not already available now. And so with that, I still feel that staff's recommendation is proper, and I would support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morzini. Mr. Moore?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm going to just make mine as short as I can, but I do happen to agree with condition 4, and I find it hard that we're making the decision that that's not the use we want there. I think the poor landlord's got to have some leeway, and he needs an opportunity, and I find it judgmental, and I find it difficult to do that. But I think I'm going to use Ron's words and just say that, you know, I kind of defer to the police department and everything, and I do understand, but I don't think this is the correct location. I'd like to see Liquor Barn here in West Sacramento, but not there. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Galvan?
Yeah, I'll make mine short as well. I just have a question for staff. I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time, but you mentioned that there may not be a liquor license available. Is that because that area is considered an overconcentrated area?
That was the information that was provided to us last time by Lieutenant Sockman from the police department.
And those are standards that ABC sets for a number of liquor licenses in a general specific?
It's so many licenses per population. I forget what the exact ratio is.
Mr. Galvan, too, just as I interrupted Mr. Liebig, I apologize, that came up last time, and you can certainly ask that's independent of our decision. So we could make a decision, and then that's a separate action, just to clarify.
I understand.
Okay.
I think I agree with what most of the commissioners have said tonight. I think first of all, I was impressed with the applicant's presentation. I'm impressed that he got a ABC supervisor to write him a letter of support, and I don't doubt that he runs a quality business and would probably set a higher standard, but I do agree that I don't think that this is a compatible area. My concern, as Commissioner Liebig said, was we have the school, the library, and so many other businesses like that or places like that close by, and then we have the same product available with all the other stores in the area. So I would agree with what the other commissioners said regarding that. But I would like to see this could be a good project maybe in another place in town.
Thank you, Mr. Galvan. Mr. Ledesma.
Yeah, I'll make this short as well, and thank you, sir, for coming out and providing a little more background on yourself and the kind of business you do run, and I respect that the direction you're taking your business. I have to agree with a majority, though, of the commissioners. Just in terms of, I do think staff has made the proper findings, specifically around item 4. Mr. Moore, I think, and not to pick on you, Commissioner Moore, but just it is a bit judgmental. I think that was the point when they gave it a conditional use designation, so that bodies like us could assess kind of the state of certain areas and allow us the latitude whether it fits into what we're trying to do. And it's been well articulated already, the direction we're trying to go on West Capitol. And it's really no judgment on your business per se, on your specific liquor barn concept. It's just for my purposes, for my belief, and I agree, it's just not in a compatible area. I wish you and Mr. Richter would go and search maybe another property where in West Sacramento where it might be a better fit. Certainly, though, I have to agree with staff on how it looked at item 4. That would be the anchor of this block of West Capitol. And with the high degree of investment we put into the building we're sitting in, the buildings across the street, the Civic Center that's about to be finished, those are all important uses and all important buildings and direction we're setting for this part of West Capitol. And with the concentration of liquor stores. And I understand Mr. Liebig's concern, and I would tend to agree with that those are causing the problem, and those could be. However, we're looking at this specific project and not those other 7, and based on that judgment, I tend to agree with staff on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ledesma, and I'm essentially in agreement with you, so rather than belabor the discussion, I agree with you. I apologize to Mr. Liebig for interrupting you. I wasn't following quite your logic, and I wanted us to stay on point with regard to this item, so I do apologize. So with that, are there any clarifications or anything else you'd like to make, Mr. Tilley? No? Bring it back to the commission for a motion action.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to move the staff recommended action.
I'll second that.
Moved by Mr. Morzini, seconded by Mr. Galvan. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Right, that passes unanimously for denial. And Mr. Ricola, could you please read the appeal process?
Yes, any interested party may appeal the decision of the Planning Commission in this matter to the City Council by filing a written appeal within 15 days of tonight's action. The appeal must be accompanied by the appropriate filing fee, and the applicant will be responsible for all staff costs incurred in preparing the appeal before the City Council.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to our last item of the evening, which is item number 4, a public hearing on ordinance 10-12, proposed changes to the zoning administrator function. And we'll hear, this is actually a hearing, so we'll hear from Mr. Ricola.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
Who is also the applicant? No.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Ricola.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission. About 3 weeks ago, we held a public workshop on this item. At that meeting, there was testimony from the Chamber of Commerce as well as a couple of the commissioners. And the testimony basically had to deal with the fact that should we adopt this process, then it would be important for the city to see that the cost of the application and appeal process not be greater than what is currently the case. And it was brought up by Commissioner Morzini that hopefully with this kind of process that the actual fee could actually be lowered. Well, now 2 weeks ago, we conducted a workshop before the City Council on this item. The Council had a number of issues that are summarized on pages 2 and 3 of the staff report, and I won't go into them in detail, but I just want to focus on one of the most significant one, in my opinion. And that the most significant is of the process of how staff will assure that zoning administrator items will receive adequate public notice and the public will have an opportunity to comment. And the basic concern of the council was that given some of the recent actions that occurred in the city, particularly for a particular tree, how is the public notified on actions in general, and how will the public be notified on a zoning administrator action? Well, currently, on a zoning administrator action, not all residents are notified in every case of a zoning administrator action. Many of the minor permits, such as a lot line adjustment or a merger, there is not a notification of the public. So what staff is proposing that all zoning administrator actions, regardless of the action, that the public be notified of the application and the notice be circulated the same day that the application comes into the city. Now, nearly in all cases when we receive a zoning administrator application, because there's been prior contact, the application is complete. The application is not as difficult and cumbersome as, for example, a conditional use permit or a tentative map. That's the process that we're looking at. In addition, above that, is that all actions of the zoning administrator will, in fact, be published on the back door. The commission will receive notification of the items in the administrative newsletter. Now, with my departure at the end of October, there will be a new zoning administrator assigned to the city. That zoning administrator, like myself, if I was in that position, if an item is going to be the least bit controversial or there are comments received back, that item will be referred to the Planning Commission. Now, admittedly, that's at the discretion of the zoning administrator, but the new zoning administrator is probably going to have significant more difficulty than I, and probably be even more willing to take an item up and refer it to the Planning Commission. So anyway, those are the safeguards that we've added. They do not need to be in the ordinance per se. We're proposing that those safeguards and the recommendation that you have to the City Council go with them tonight, but we think the adequate safeguards with complete notification to the public on all zoning administrator actions will help the process that, as well as the other things that I've discussed tonight and in the staff report. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions for Mr. Ricola? It looks like Mr.
I'll
Marzini.
get started.
Okay.
Oh, boy.
I haven't had a chance to pick on you in a long time, Steve, so.
And I was hoping it would continue.
You've been doing such a wonderful job, you know. But I do have a couple comments to make. In the appeals process, there isn't a stipulation of what that fee would be. You do indicate that on the fourth page, 17.14-080, that there will be a fee schedule will be set up for the applications. But what about the appeals? You just indicated verbally that you really want that not to exceed what it would cost otherwise during our process, current
Well,
process.
there's a couple of things I was talking about. First of all, if an application went to the Planning Commission and it was appealed to the City Council, there's a standard appeal fee. That appeal fee is $100. Currently, we have either a fixed rate, such as on lot line adjustments and mergers, or we have a deposit on zoning administrators fee, which we only charge for our staff time on it. We're of the belief that, should this be adopted, that the staff time is going to be less because it's not going to take the time of having the report Xeroxed and prepared and submitted to the Planning Commission. It's going to be done fairly quickly, and the hope would be that every week, probably on a Friday, that all the zoning administrator actions go to the new zoning administrator, and that she or he would make a ruling on them, fairly expeditiously. So the hope is that there will be less staff time, and then the thought is that perhaps after a year of having this process, if the development services manager and community development director asked that a new fee analysis be done, hopefully we'd be able to show that on the fixed rate applications, as opposed to deposit ones, they in fact could perhaps be done cheaper. We don't know that, but I think it's something that we've indicated to the council and that the remaining staff would probably indicate their commitment to. So if we can achieve economies and reduce fees, that would be great. It's just that there's no assurance, Commissioner Morazzini, that that would actually be the case. But we hope with this expedited process, there would be economies that would result in savings.
So the statement that the council is authorized to promulgate by resolution, they're going to establish these fees, and we will include that appeal fee.
Yes, based on the recommendation of staff.
Great.
Correct. Yes.
Thank you. Just a couple more. In the resolution, or the ordinance 10-12,
yes,
there are several references to the commission. However, in all of the words and the statements prior to that, it doesn't stipulate the planning commission. In fact, the only time the planning commission is mentioned is on the last page, capital letter A, the first sentence. It says the planning commission shall review all applications. So kind of a housekeeping thing. You might want to.
I'm sorry, I'm not quite following. Are you looking at resolution 10-8?
10-12.
Pardon me?
10-12.
Oh.
Ordinance 10-12.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Attachment 1.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The word commission appears several times on the second page and third page, but it doesn't refer to the planning commission. And on the last page, the first three words are the planning commission. So it's covered there, but all the prior stuff doesn't refer to what commission we're talking about.
Okay, that's a good point, but I think this was the way the ordinance was originally drafted. It's been in existence since the first zoning ordinance was adopted by the city in 1993, And I think it's implied, the Planning Commission, in cases where we've gone back and added things to it.
Yeah.
We have brought that back in this draft, but I think it's,
Well, you know, I'm not a
But
real
that is a
complicated person,
change.
but it seemed like if you would state the
Right.
planning commission the first time and then refer to the commission after that.
but that's a change that we can make without affecting the proposed changes. So
Sure.
if
Yeah.
the
Just-
commission
just
felt, I just
housekeeping.
conferred with legal counsel here, that that would be advisable or helpful, we can make that without going and changing the ordinance itself.
Okay.
Correct, counsel? Okay.
And now the personal thing. I told you I was going to pick a bone with you. I support what's being proposed just about completely. The only area where I see that we might get appeals is traditionally, and you're retiring in October, and I'm going to miss you. I want to tell you that right now. I am. I've enjoyed working with you over the years. However, when it comes to variances having to do with lot splits, the position that staff has taken 100% of the time is to deny the requests. And I can't think of a time when this commission has met over a variance and using, kind of loosely using the interpretation of a variance whenever that we're entitled to make variances up to 75% of what is established. So I'm going to take say a parcel split in a rural residential area. We've seen many of those. Maybe somebody has a 1.9 acre parcel and they want to split it up into rural residential lots, but the minimum is 1 acre. And I can't think of a time when we haven't approved that type of application. And I can't think of a time when staff has ever recommended that we approve it. And so I'm not really saying this tongue in cheek, but I want to make sure that this process is speedy, and this may be the one item that we would not want to include, that not go directly to the, use the process that we used before, where the zoning administrator make a recommendation and the commission would either affirm it or overrule it. So otherwise, I think it's a great opportunity. It meets the goals that you intended to cut down on staff time and the process for the applicants. And again, just with the exception of the parcel split variances.
Okay, well, let me comment on that because you brought up some important points. First of all, parcel splits will still be coming to the Planning Commission. We're not proposing any changes on that. Now,
When there's
zoning
variances?
Pardon me?
Are there variances involved?
Well, I was going to get to that. Now, a zoning administrator variance, on the other hand, but it would be at the discretion of the zoning administrator whether or not to approve that or not. So, if the new zoning administrator wants to be cautious, it would probably be most likely that those zoning administrator variances will be coming to you. Those sometimes involve a lot of discretion, and it's very likely that could. But once again, that choice remains with the zoning administrator, and I think your comments tonight would be not only passed on to the council, but also, to the no zoning administrator. That may be an item to pay particular concern or interest to and bring them to the Planning Commission. So that would be my comment on that.
Thank you, Steve. And again, it's been a pleasure all these months working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morazzini.
I'm not leaving yet, still got 2 months.
And there, just for the record, there are no requests from the public to speak on this item. But we're still in public hearing format. Any other comments before I close the public hearing, and I'll bring it back for deliberation? All right, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Are there any actions, final questions, comments?
Madam Chairman.
Mr. Moore?
I'd make a motion that we affirm the recommended action.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Ledesma. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you again, Mr. Ricola.
You're welcome.
We'll look forward to working in this new world of ours. We will miss you in October. Well, that moves us to informal discussion. I'd like to start again and apologize to Mr. Liebig, simply because I actually think now, I think his bringing up concerns about current situations affecting actions in front of us actually is one that we possibly could pursue. So I think I was only, and I just want to get this on the record for you, Russ, is that I didn't want us to stop and start directing staff in a particular way, because at that moment. But it's completely, you know, if there are questions or concerns, now we could actually have some discussion about that. So if it's done and you want to drop it, I'm fine with that too. I think that was an interesting comment, and the action in front of us, we couldn't do anything about that situation, but you bring up a good concern that may affect us in the future. So I just want to open that in case you have any final comments.
Thank you. I only had two. I'll keep them brief. The existing businesses affected the decision here tonight, and there's an issue out there, and I'm not sure. Well, it comes down to, tonight we were voting on a conditional use permit for a liquor store. There are multiple businesses out there that sell liquor. I'm assuming that some of them have a conditional use permit unless they are all older than the city general plan, or whenever we began regulating that. I'm not sure the age of most of them. It seems if we are having a problem, we need to be looking at those permits. That's why we have them. So that was one of the directions. You're right. It was probably not the right time to bring that.
Well, I got corrected by folks, so it actually seemed like it was appropriate. That's why I just wanted to check so that we didn't get off track for the discussion.
And then the other one was regarding the police and tracking. And do we track these to actually be able to pinpoint what the source is of the issues? If we have an increased level of alcohol-related crimes in the north part of town, can we trace it?
Okay.
And is that in our purview and just background?
I think it's in our
Thank you.
purview, and I can either comment on it now or comment on it offline with Commissioner, whatever your preference is. But, you know, of those businesses that you've identified and were alluded to in the staff report, of those 6 or so, my guess is only 1 or 2 of them have a conditional use permit, and I'm actually familiar with one. But where, for example, the hard liquor is sold as part of a larger store, it really becomes an accessory use to the store in general, you know, that's occurring at like the Safeway or the Raley's or the Rite Aid, but where it's a principal part of the business. And in this case, of course, tonight we had an overconcentration in this particular area, which is one of the reasons why the project, one of the findings that could not be made. In terms of whether or not, you know, we track these on a regular basis, you know, from the standpoint of the planning staff, do we go and look at how they're performing? No. But if we do hear complaints, or we have input from the police department, or there, you know, it is an issue with a particular store or other things, then it's dealt with through other existing mechanisms that the city does have available to it. So that's just sort of a brief answer, but I'd be happy to have a more detailed discussion with you about that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other items for informal discussion? Mr. Liebig?
I just need to let the commission know that I will most likely not be able to make the next meeting, which is scheduled for August 19th. I'm not sure if that causes a problem. If there's any way I can get here, I will certainly let you know.
Thank you. Any other? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Moved by Mr. Moore, seconded by Mr. Ledesma. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Meeting's over. Thank you.